Iris Anywhere is software which is installed on-prem or in EC2 and provides user sessions to log in and use the tools that the Iris engine provides in a browser window where you can see the video, see the tools, play content from that's stored wherever you're mapping storage to the instance of the software, playing content, viewing content, and QCing content. And Iris QC Pro is software that's installed into a server. That server might have an SDI card. That server might have a large RAID attached to it or is mapped directly to local storage on-prem. Both Iris QC Pro and Iris Anywhere can connect to Iris Admin Server, which is a license server that allows certain capabilities beyond just Iris Anywhere requires this to manage logins and security. Iris QC Pro uses this to share things like Active Directory login, to manage QC workflows and things like that. But the key engineering difference between QC Pro and Iris Anywhere is that Iris Anywhere is playing content back into a browser, and Iris QC Pro is playing back onto a PC screen and or an HDMI screen and or an SDI screen. So one is eyes on glass and the other one is not. And today we're going to be taking a look at Iris Anywhere. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if that works. So here's a login to Iris Anywhere, and I'm just going to log in. And I'm here on the East Coast of the United States, and I'm logging into an Iris Anywhere server in Washington State. And Iris Anywhere can be installed on-prem, on server, on a VM, or in EC2. And it can open content. If it was installed on a server behind your firewall and so forth, you can map content from drives, storage locations to it so that it can see those files. And same thing with S3 buckets if it were running in EC2. So here's the interface for Iris Anywhere. And just like Iris QC Pro, the first thing I'm going to do is just switch this over to load a profile here and just call it the basic player. And that's what I had. So if I wanted to open a file in Iris Anywhere, I just right click and say open file, and I'm going to open up this file. And same as Iris QC Pro, both applications give you this interface where you're looking at the video asset that you're going to play and whether you want to use audio that's embedded in it or if you want to add external audio. Same thing for captions. I don't know if you guys have a captions or a subtitle workflow, but what we're doing here is we're pre-processing embedded captions into a viewer so that we can see them. But this is where you could also add external captions, and Iris Anywhere support every known type of external captions, TTMLs, SRTs, cap files, and so on. So once you're opening the file, come on, baby. Here we go. There we go. So now I'm playing the file. I'm just going to turn down the audio from it. So a quick tour around the interface. Here we have the window where the asset is playing. And on the left, upper left here, I have what we call the asset metadata window, which is sort of like a media info on steroids that's giving me both metadata that's being calculated, the loudness, and then metadata about the video track and the audio tracks, Dolby tracks, caption tracks, timecode tracks, things like that. Over here, as you can see, I have these tools out on the screen. I can rearrange them however I want and then store layouts for me as a user, which you're going to see me do. Over here, I have two tools tabbed next to each other, a status panel and a subtitle viewer. The status panel is telling me about the performance of the server that's running Iris Anywhere. If you had to log in to this instance of Iris Anywhere and you logged in, you could log in and be playing a different file or this file, and your use of Iris Anywhere would be impacting the CPU load, which is how we're load balancing how many users can log in. And that's also dependent on what types of files you're playing. So I'm playing a 60 megabit video commercial MPEG. But if I was playing a 4K Dolby Vision IMF, then I'd be hitting the server differently. So the amount of users that can actively use a software instance of Iris Anywhere depends on what you're playing and how many users you're playing it with and what kind of system that software is installed on. So the installation and delivery of Iris Anywhere has a lot to do with figuring out how many users, what kind of files, things like that. Very simply, right? Here I am. This is the play controls for Iris should be familiar to everybody. They're basically, you have play controls, pause controls. You can do things like kick video into fast forward up to 16 times. You can play it backwards. Over here, you see I have these controls for what time base I'm working in. Am I working in milliseconds, in time code, control track, or frame? And you can use this interface to change which one you want to look at. And then when you look at this display, you can actually enter in which frame you want to go to, and the playhead will move there. We have a timeline that you can drag around, and the picture will change as you do that. We also have a mark in and a mark out. So if I wanted to set a mark in here, I could set a mark in by pushing the button. And if I wanted to just manually drag the mark out, I could do that, or I could put the playhead where I want it and hit mark out. And now when I play this file, it's just going to be looping between that area. If I want to just restore that, I can just drag the mark out and the mark in back, and I've got the whole file back. Here in the information window, I see the frame that I'm on. On the upper right here, CPU, video, audio, SDI, AFD. This is where we're essentially mirroring the information that's in the status panel: audio errors, video errors, audio buffers, video buffers, CPU. Iris needs to feed a certain number of frames into the application before it starts playing. And if we're keeping that buffer full, that means we're playing it smoothly. And when you start seeing errors here or there, that means we're dropping frames because we're not able to get content into the playback engine fast enough. So this tool in the status panel and these warning lights are good to use when you're playing files from the SAN and you're trying to figure out and tweak how to get them to play better, or where the performance issue is. And so that's what these are for. If I right-click on the screen, I have all of these different options, and I can start looking at my on-screen overlays. So right now, as you can see, I have the closed captions coming up on screen. I have audio levels, but if I want to put the time display and video properties and a closed caption grid on screen, there they are. I've got all of that turned on now. I've got a closed caption grid. I've got area markers. I've got audio and so forth. But for the purposes of this, I don't need the audio levels. I want to keep the time display. I don't need the video properties. I'm going to get rid of the grid. So now I have what I want on screen. When we're talking about captions, Iris is right now, let me just get that window out of the way. Right now, I'm looking at live captions. And live captions in Iris and Iris Anywhere are just de-embedding the caption where the playhead is, the same way that your TV or your set-top box or your DVD player is doing when you're playing an asset. You can see the caption that's supposed to be on the screen live when it happens. The other kind of caption here is pre-processed external. When I opened this file, I had the application extract the 608 captions into this CC1, which are represented over here. I could turn these on either by going through this menu and selecting this CC1 service, or I could just right-click over here and set active. And now these are the active captions. And even though these are the same as the embedded, I've just extracted the embedded into a temporary location. This is what it would look like if we were using external captions. And that's what's being overlaid on screen. And you can use these to navigate around the asset just by clicking in it. So that's the sort of caption workflow. Now let's there we go. And you can navigate to all of the different services of embedded captions depending on what they are and how you want to use them. So we were talking about layouts and tools. Over here I have audio level meters, but what I've done is I've If I go to my environment here and load a profile, here's another layout that has more tools on screen. So now when I'm playing this asset, I have a waveform monitor, a vector scope, and a spectroscope. And these tools, the way this is working is the Iris engine that's in Seattle is opening this video asset locally. And all of these tools and all of the data driven from the asset metadata and these tools are coming directly out of the video as it's being accessed by that Iris engine. Normally, in an Iris QC Pro workflow, that Iris engine is managing that video asset and then feeding uncompressed frames into a PC display, into an SDI card display, and outputting that as SDI or to a PC screen. In Iris Anywhere, what it's doing is it's taking those frames and feeding them to a VP8 or VP9 ultra-low latency encoder and streaming that in real time to the user. So this is not a transcode, it's a live encode. So the video asset that's playing in Iris Anywhere is after these scopes. But the performance is extremely high, and you can tweak this performance to suit your users depending on where they are and what their bandwidth is. So the minimum bandwidth for using Iris Anywhere is around 30 megabits for a home user, and you do need a reasonably recent laptop, like a 10-year-old Dell Latitude might not be the best laptop to experience Iris Anywhere, but any modern laptop with a modern browser should have a fine experience. The only browser that we don't currently support is Safari. So for your reference, I'm on a MacBook Pro. I'm running this in Microsoft Edge. Another thing about Iris Anywhere is that right now I'm seeing this asset play in its native frame rate. And the native frame rate for this is 2997. That's what I'm seeing here. If this was 24, I'd be seeing it at 24 frames a second. There's no frame interpolation. This isn't like remote desktop or any kind of remote access system where the entire desktop experience is being encoded at, like if my Teams screen share to you right now is 12 frames per second, 5 megabit or something like that. I'm seeing real-time frames play the way they would. So with Waveform Monitor, I have all of these different options as to which gradicules I want to display on screen, what's the range, what's the mode, same thing for the vector scope, and then down here with the spectroscope. And as I said, you can resize these and drag them around to suit your need and then store those layouts. The spectroscope is talking about color space information. And I have the spectroscope right now set up for gradicules for 709, 2020, and Dolby P3. I'm automatically determining the color primaries of the asset from its metadata. Same thing for its range. And I'm mapping every pixel on screen in the asset to the color space that it's in. So when you're working with high dynamic range files and so forth, you can see where that color space maps to its color, how it maps to its color space. And of course, if you want to teach some color science, you can accumulate traces and see a diagram of that. But if you're working with high dynamic range files, Iris has a bunch of use cases where we do a lot of different things with high dynamic range. So in the basic QC tools, I have waveform monitor, vector scope, spectroscope, audio level meters. And sorry here, I'm just going to jump around a little bit more. And then when we start talking about audio, Iris has other tools for audio. So here in Iris Anywhere, there is a router that's 64 channels of input and 2 channels of output corresponding to the laptop that I'm on left and right. And currently, Iris Anywhere is a 2-channel output software. So you can hear left and right here. And if I wanted to listen, this track is 5.1. If I wanted to only listen to sender, I could just click on 3. And now when I'm playing it, centers what I'm hearing. And of course, in Iris QC Pro, you have 16 channels of output corresponding to SDI output. Now, coming soon in Iris is the ability to to connect an external sound card, like a USB Sound Blaster Creative Labs card or something like that, and carry 5.1 and 7.1 through Iris Anywhere to an external sound card and power an array of speakers. But right now, what our users are doing is they're using a combination of the audio routing panel and this audio mixing tool, where what I can do is well, this mix is already here, so I'm just going to delete it and make a new mix. So here's a new mix, and I want to take this 5.1 and mix it down to stereo. And I've just created that stereo mix here that's been saved, but you can actually get in here and tweak all of this and create your own mix. So now what I've done is I've made a stereo mix mathematically of 5.1 down to stereo. And over here in the router, you can see that I've essentially created virtual channels 7 and 8 where my 5.1 mix to stereo is. So now when I play this asset, oops, didn't mean to do that. Now when I hit play, what I'm listening to is the 5.1 mix to stereo that I just made. So that's one way that you can listen to multi-channel audio, and these can be saved and stored and named. I'm just going to delete it for the moment and then talk about audio loudness. So Iris QC Pro and Iris Anywhere have pretty extensive methods for measuring audio loudness. And the first thing that we would want to do is look in options under loudness and see here, I can calculate loudness measurements in these standards, the EBU or the A85 as standard loudness measurements, or I can use a custom loudness measurement. But we also have Dolby Dialogue Intelligence loudness. And here I'm just selecting which standard of Dolby Dialogue Intelligence I want to measure, and then where is the loudness? Am I looking at stereo in tracks in channels 1 and 2? Am I looking for 5.1 in 1 through 6, which I am? Do I want to make any changes to the monitor? And if not, click OK. So now, when I start, I'm also going to set this to not loop, because the audio loudness monitor functions almost exactly like a scope. While the asset is playing, the audio loudness monitor, loudness monitor is measuring the loudness according to the standard set while the application is playing the asset. And when this 30-second commercial hits end, or at least the end of when I had it play, this will stop, and this will be our loudness measurements for the asset. And there we go. Now we've got, well, at least until I set that mark out there. Now, over here, this loudness measurement is measured when the file is open, and this loudness measurement changes when you set a mark in or a mark out, and it's recalculated. So this is a scope, and this is measurement of that loudness between mark in and mark out, whether or not you're looking at this scope. So this is good for short-term checking, or if you want to play the whole asset through and not stop. Because
hey, can I ask a question really quick?
Yeah, sure, please.
So what you said before, does that mean we need a real-time play out?
No.
Of the asset to do the.
Well, this is exactly what, a good question. This is exactly what I'm saying. With this tool, the audio loudness monitor, this is a scope. It requires real-time play out. So as long as you're playing I was just going to actually recreate that and say, okay, I'm going to play it. And this dip right here is when that asset started playing, and this measurement is from when I started playing. If I don't wait for the whole thing to stop and I hit stop, these measurements all reset when I hit play again, because it's a scope. It's measuring this data over time. Whereas over here, the loudness in the metadata is calculated via a different method. And this loudness is calculated by setting a mark in, setting a mark out. Oops, I did that a little close. Setting a mark out. And now you'll see these numbers changing. These numbers it doesn't matter whether I'm playing or paused. These numbers are directly connected to the mark in and mark out. And there is a different tool in Iris QC Pro called the audio waveform tool, which isn't in Iris Anywhere as a graphic thing, even though it's powering this display. And the audio waveform tool, when you open an asset, it draws the waveforms out for the whole asset, and then it calculates the loudness between the mark in and the mark out. And if you change the mark in or the mark out, or change the standard of measurement or the channels that you want to look at measure, it recalculates. So there's two methods for obtaining loudness, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Thanks.
So there's one that calculates the loudness based on the settings and the file open, and there's the other that calculates while you play, just like a scope. So lots of audio function. If I switch to let's talk a little bit about where am I going here? So with more complex, so this is an IMF. When you open an IMF, or this is a DCP actually, so IMF or DCP, we calculate some checksums against the XML, but you don't need to actually wait for that calculation to complete. I can just click OK and load this complex package. This one is a DCP, but this is the same for IMF. Same process, and now I'm playing this this DCP here in Iris. This is 24 frames per second. That's what I'm seeing here, and so on. What I wanted to do was get to some let's go to this. So, sorry?
No, sorry.
So I just wanted to show off a little bit of high dynamic range workflow. So here in this asset, this is a 2398 Apple ProRes. It is 709 color matrix. It's in Dolby P3 color space, 444 12-bit, 444 XQ Essence profile. And what Iris is doing with this asset is here, if I look at this is a mirror of this, but my HDR simulation is set to automatically render high dynamic range content you're using metadata. If I turn that off and I go back to playing this asset, you'll see that the colorimetry of this footage is totally changed. This is, the saturation is off for this asset. Now, granted, this is a 709 in the Dolby P3, so it's not actually, if I switch back to my QC tools here so that we can look at the color space data, you'll see that it's, right now my simulation is off, but if I start playing this asset, it's showing up in the 709, it's showing up in the P3 color space, but the colors in the image are 709. So I actually have my HDR simulation turned back on here. Iris Anywhere does this for HDR 10, for Dolby Vision. It allows me to, for example, if this was a Dolby Vision asset, I would be able to choose the Dolby Vision target display. So if I wanted to look at the 200 nit or the 1000 nit, I could do that here. And when I'm working with a HDR file, you'll see here that my waveform monitor has changed to be displaying in nits, up to 10,000 nits here. So we can look at and simulate accurately high dynamic range in Iris Anywhere and in QC Pro. And that gets into the sort of issues about where high dynamic range metadata goes when you're playing it, right? Because you can embed HDR10 metadata into SDI, but you can't embed Dolby Vision metadata into SDI. You can embed both into HDMI, and you can't embed them into the RGB display within a computer application. So we are certified by Dolby that our simulation, so-called, of high dynamic range from Dolby Vision is accurate. So what you can do is you can actually play a Dolby Vision asset using Iris, have that metadata drive the brightness of the SDI, and when you select the trim for 1000 nits in SDI, and you're going to a 1000 nit monitor, that will look like the accurate grade that it would on a 1000 nit LG OLED. At the same time, depending on what HDMI hardware you're using, you can embed Dolby Vision or HDR metadata into the HDMI and drive your Sony and your LG OLED and have the light on the monitor light turn on and say, I see that HDR content and react accordingly. In Iris Anywhere, what we're doing is we're showing you that metadata and we're simulating that picture accurately in the PC playback screen. Does that make sense so far? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch over to annotations for a sec. So here I have a bunch of other tools out. I have annotations and I have a project viewer. And you can think of the project window as a way to look at bins in a nonlinear editor. I have this project called demo here, but if I wanted to make a new project, I can just make one and call it new project. Projects contain files. And so in this project, I can put whatever file I want from whatever files I have. I'm just going to throw our Hallmark asset into this project. So now I have this Hallmark asset in the project. When I double click on it, I'm opening it in the player from the project. And these projects can contain video assets, audio assets, caption assets, file-based QC assets from Baton, VidChecker, or Aurora. And so once I have an asset from a project, this one I just made, open, I can go about adding annotations. If I went to here now and I want to add a QC report to this asset, where do I put where are they? Reports. There they are. So here's some example file-based QC reports. I know that the time code in these reports isn't going to match this particular asset that I've opened, but what they look like when they come in, they look like this. So here are all of these annotations that came in from, and you can see here that they're also noted across the timeline, each of these annotations from this file-based QC report, which I believe was Aurora. And an operator can look at these and go through them and navigate around the asset by double-clicking on it. And you'll see that as I go some distance into this file, that I'm actually jumping around the asset, moving the timeline. But an operator can look at this one, can add a note. Yes, I'm sorry.
I don't think anybody's saying anything.
Okay, I thought I heard something.
No, there's someone in the background.
Say this one's good. I can change its priority to green. I can move on to the next one and mark off these annotations. I can also add annotations however I like at whatever point I like, just by navigating to a place and putting a new annotation that appears like this and say this is a new annotation. Okay. So I've just added a new annotation. The other thing that we have going on with annotations is I have segment data. Segment data is different from annotations in that annotations are broadly applied to the timeline, and depending on whether or not a file-based QC system like Baton or VidChecker is creating the annotations, the nomenclature, the language that annotation is created using comes directly from the file-based QC software, or as you just saw, I manually said new annotation at this point and wrote whatever I want here. Segment data is a little different. In segment data, you, the customer, defines a basic list of what you want segments to be. And that list is an incredibly short XML document that says, call a segment data, here's a segment, mark in, mark out, extreme violence, nudity, whatever. And when you go to a point and you want to add a segment data based annotation, up comes this interface where, they must have updated the software. Basically, you see a drop-down list of the types of segments. So this could say mark in, mark out, violence, nudity, video color correction issue, and it's set on a frame, and it can have a duration. where you can move this and set an endpoint. So it's a 41 frame note. It has a drop down, and then I can add more notes here. But the notes that I'm adding, this segment is the nomenclature of what this segment is defined by your work and how you want to run things. So you can call these segments whatever you want, and you have the difference between segment data and annotations. Segment data being really customer customizable. So now that I've done some QC work, I've looked at annotations, I've taken some notes, and I can go back and forth changing the environment to what scope. I can bring up a display where I've got scopes and loudness monitor and whatever, and then go back to this project or set up the tools however I want to use them on screen. And eventually, when I finish here, I have this project. I can go to QC result, incomplete, pass, fail notes. So if I want to say it passes, I can say it's okay, add some notes, save that, close that. So now I have a QC result set, and I can generate a QC report. And I can generate this QC report in XML, in JSON, or in PDF. And I'm generating that QC report. Here it is. I'm just going to open the file. This whole interface for what this QC report looks like is customizable by you. This is just the default look. It has our logo and our title. It has the name of the asset, who the operator was, what the QC result is, the metadata organized the way we set it up as a default, information about the general information, the video information, the audio information, caption information, and so forth. And then you get down into both the annotations, which were brought in from VidChecker, bait, and file-based QC reports, or were manually created by a user. This is a new annotation. But then at the bottom, you also have, there we go, segment data annotations. So segment data might say segment data type, mark in, frame, etc., note, mark out, frame, etc., note, violence, frame, time, etc., notes, whatever, however you wanted to use segment data. And this PDF or XML or JSON is also stored in the Iris admin server. So automation, when I was talking about these projects, I just manually created this project. But automation can create these projects and assign them to groups or assign them to users. And then users and groups can see assets in this project. You could organize a project however you want, one project per episode, one project per season. That's just a workflow question. And then assign these to users and groups, and then have automation be aware of the status of a particular project, and when the result is set a certain way, then and saved, that can be an actionable item stored in our Iris server. So it's a way to use these tools for the management of that workflow. Talk about some differences between everything I just did with annotations is present in Iris QC Pro as well. So all of these interfaces about projects and results and management of things like that are within Iris QC Pro as well. You'll see here that my options, I have some things that I can set as a user and changing what loudness I'm looking at, changing at what time code my MXF source time codes are, my high dynamic range simulation settings. Iris Anywhere and Iris QC Pro are both qualified by Dolby for Dolby Atmos, Dolby E, Dolby Vision metadata, Dolby Digital Plus. Both applications can play DCPs and convert XYZ color space for DCP files, but also they have access to be generating certificates and importing KDMs to play encrypted DCPs. There's a lot of work with respect to subtitles and getting subtitles to work, depending on whether you want to make an offset, how you want them to display, and so forth. That's my end-to-end tour.
How does it fare with MPEG-2 transport stream? Loading it up, and because we deal with a lot of MPEG-2 transport stream
Yep,
for QC.
we play MPEG-2 transport streams. Let me see if I have one handy. Let's see here. There's one. This is an OJ Simpson transport stream. Use audio, process captions.